Support WrestleTalk!
Hello, welcome to this WrestleTalk reactive news. I'm Chopper Pequenell, joined by Randy Andy Datson. Tempest is still in Canada, so it's me again.
Oh man, if only he hadn't smuggled all those drugs.
Yeah, God, what a terrible person. Love you, Tempest. Well, today, as is the talk of the wrestling world at large right now, we're going to be talking about Triple H.
Who?
Just to change things up. You
Oh,
know?
Paul Levesque.
Paul Levesque, that's the
Yeah.
man. Obviously, he's the talk of the wrestling world right now, taking over head of creative in WWE, with his wife being co-CEO. They're the power couple right now. And now he's had SummerSlam under his belt, which everyone seemed to really enjoy.
Yes.
And he's had his first proper episode of Raw, because the last week's episode of Raw was still very much a Vince McMahon episode.
Yes. And I reviewed it yesterday, and it was good. It wasn't brilliant, but it was good. It had stories. People are very happy.
Yeah.
The mood backstage is apparently very high. So it seems to be going well.
Yes. But what we shouldn't forget is Triple H is still Vince McMahon's son-in-law.
He is.
Because Triple H appeared on Logan Paul's podcast, Impaulsive. Pains me to say
That
it.
is, that, you know when you kind of, you're pitching ideas for something, what they've done there is gone with the one that they've gone,
I mean, admittedly, we've done that twice.
with Parts Unknown.
Parts Unknown and Quizzlemania.
Yes. Parts Unknown was just someone went, "Ugh, that's dumb." And then half an hour later went, "Hey, it's the best thing we've
It's the
come up
best thing
with."
we got, so I guess we'll go with it. But Triple H appeared on Impaulsive, Logan Paul's podcast, and in classic WWE fashion, they like to write wrestling history because they're the biggest thing, so, you know, history is dictated by the winners and all that stuff. Triple H mentioned about Vince McMahon's retirement, speaking on his admiration for Vince McMahon. And he's saying, without Vince McMahon, you know, none of this happens. And he specifically said, got the quote here, the vision to take it from this tiny little thing happening in bars that are this big to this global sensation like nothing else.
Yeah. I believe the story, and this is the true story, is that Vince was sitting in a bar one day and he saw two guys have a fight. And he went, I'm going to make that into a global sensation. And then he just did it.
And then that's what happened. And the next day, and on the 7th day, he rested.
Yeah, and then the next day was WrestleMania 1.
Yeah,
I believe. He called Mr. T and he went, "Are you free?"
Yeah.
And he went, "Oh, yeah, I reckon so." What did you have in mind?
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, this global wrestling phenomenon." He's like, "I've never even heard of wrestling. What are you talking about?"
Yeah. So this, obviously, there's a lot of people who are kind of unaware of wrestling history who are just like, well, isn't that what happened? Like, WWE is the biggest thing. Isn't that clearly not what happened? That's what I've been told for like 30 years. So it's obviously what happens. Not really. Because if you actually look at wrestling history, there's loads of instances of people drawing tens of thousands of fans to big arenas. You had, you know, Dusty Rhodes versus Ric Flair at the Greensboro Coliseum. You had Junkyard Dog versus Michael Hayes, drew 30,000 people in the Superdome. You had Bruno Sammartino selling out MSG on the reg, you know?
I remember it well.
Wrestling was big before Vince McMahon. And then there's actually a couple of really interesting tweets from Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics, who kind of summed up the whole thing. Quotes from Brandon Thurston here saying, before Vince, numerous regions had promotions drawing thousands weekly. After he got a hold of it, one or two US companies could consistently draw 1,000 plus weekly. And every region now has an indie running bar-sized venues. Vince was great for his business and his only. Maybe this end result would have been inevitable as media became more national, and maybe the regional promoters failed to evolve, but Vince didn't take wrestling out of the small rooms and into the arenas. If anything, literally the opposite is true.
He just moved it to a more mainstream kind of thing. He basically took it onto the mainstream media on TV, and who knows what would have happened if he hadn't done that.
Like, the thing is, the territory system that wrestling used to have wouldn't exist today. Like, there's no way that system would still be here if Vince didn't destroy the territories, which he did. Vince destroyed the territories, and he was a ruthless businessman.
They became big enough so that whatever they said, everyone went, "Oh, okay. That's the truth, is it? Right, okay, got it. Don't pretend that the ashes of what the Phoenix came from never existed."
Yeah. Or at the very least, like, don't underplay their significance in history.
Because
you have huge megastars that even they promote. You know, they're the ones that are complimenting, you know, Bruno Sammartino in the Hall of Fame and stuff. And it's like, he sold out arenas, but also those arenas didn't exist because Vince McMahon is actually the one that took him into the arenas.
But it also makes you a more admirable and respectable product. If you go, guys, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the kind of pioneers of the early 20th century and the mid 20th century.
Yeah.
But if you go, oh no, the first wrestler ever was Bruno Sammartino. He's the first wrestler in the history of ever. He invented it, and then Vince McMahon helped him.
Yeah. And, you know, like, Hulk Hogan didn't exist before Vince McMahon got him. It wasn't like Hulkamania was a huge thing that Vince just took and put
He was just
into
called Hogan,
his company.
and then Vince went, oh, you're a big guy.
Yeah.
How do you fancy being a wrestler?
Yeah, exactly. There was also another comment, slightly less controversial, I think, on this one. But Triple H mentioning about like the psychology of putting a wrestling match together and what's important in putting on a good wrestling match. It's like that gap that people have, right? Even our talent that have been doing this a really long time, it's not the moves. It's like watching a movie. How many movies have you seen with crazy budgets and special effects and CGI that visually you go, holy S, that's amazing, and no one cares? The movie bombs, there's no story, no one really fully cares. It's not about the moves, what we do, it's about what you do in between, the characters, the story. Now, I think he has a point, and I think he definitely has a point in saying that you can have a really athletic, incredibly engaging wrestling match with lots of flips and all that stuff, but if it doesn't have the psychology baked into it or the characters or the story, it's not going to resonate quite as well. I would argue, though, that moves do matter.
Moves absolutely matter, and judging simply by last night's Monday night's Raw, moves do matter.
Yeah.
Because they keep tweeting pictures of that move, the AJ Styles clash onto the Miz. Of course they matter. Like you say, I get what he's saying, and yes, there are plenty of movies which are all just explosions and nothing else, but also
Michael Bay.
I saw Everything Everywhere All at Once yesterday, and it's fantastic. And because it's got crazy stunts, but also it's got a fantastic story. It's important to have both because especially for I think a more mainstream product like WWE, because not everyone is there just for the wrestling, and not everyone is there just for the characters. There has to be a happy medium. The argument that some people will be having is that WWE, let's say, is 70% story, 30% moves.
Sure.
AEW is more 60% moves, 40% story. The stories are very good.
I'd even argue 70% moves. And
yeah,
30% story.
but so it's probably the opposite, and the people are like, yeah, but WWE is more popular.
Therefore,
it is the stories which are important, and yes, but also WWE's been around for a lot longer, and it's had 40, 50 years to build up its fan base, and their kids are now fans. So while I get that, I still think a mixed approach is much better for a modern audience.
And coming from someone who's an AEW fan, I'm also a WWE fan. Contrary to what a lot of people think, I do enjoy WWE's programming when it's good. I feel like a lot of AEW's hype around a lot of its stories is it's this person versus this person. It goes, oh, amazing, that match is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Whereas in WWE, there is an element of that, of being like, it's this person versus this person. You're like, oh, that could be a really good match. But it's more about like, okay, what story are they trying to tell between now and the pay-per-view?
Yeah. The AEW stories are secondary because you are so excited for the match that even if the story's not perfect, you're still like, oh, but I'm still excited.
But the match is going to be great.
Yeah, it's still Kenny Omega versus Bryan Danielson. I don't care about if their story was perfect.
Exactly, yeah. And on one final quick note before we end this video off. Things that aren't perfect. Oh, it's AEW's women's division. It's not been the greatest. People have been criticizing it fairly, I think. But there's a new trademark from AEW. They have trademarked All Elite Women. And as part of the trademark filing, it mentions that the term can be used for TV production, which has got people speculating that this might be a new AEW show.
A heel spin-off.
An all-women's show.
Yes, you'd think that this wouldn't be a TV show, given how much they are struggling with Rampage at the moment.
Rampage is in a really bad time slot as well.
It's in its regular time slot, and it's getting its worst ever ratings.
Yeah, its regular time slot.
They're struggling to get a Ring of Honor show. Like Tony's really trying to get a Ring of Honor TV show. So I imagine that this would be another YouTube series.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Whether they film, I would imagine they would just film a section of AEW Dark as just like 5 women's matches, and then they would shove that on. Whether you get rid of AEW Dark Elevation because they've just got way too many wrestlers at this point. It's great to showcase their women.
Sure is.
It really is. I just don't know how effective let's say it's a weekly YouTube show, will be to do that. I think, unfortunately, there isn't the interest in women's wrestling as there is in men's wrestling. I mean, yes, it's increasing, but it feels like they're just doing it because they're like, oh, well, we need to put the women somewhere. Why don't you just put them on TV?
That's the thing.
Why don't you just have 2 matches a week?
I think that people don't care about women's wrestling because they're not being showcased as strong. It's not that women's wrestling is worse, because it is great. And I think we're seeing that in WWE now. With Triple H in control, already the WWE women's main rosters division feel reinvigorated with Bayley and Dakota Kai and Io Sky debuting and having more focus on women's matches on Raw. Like, there already feels like there's a natural upswing of support for that. So maybe this is a response from AEW to be like, actually, we need to treat our women a bit better, so we're going to give them their own show.
But hopefully it's a positive thing for the AEW women.
AEW Women's Division. That's going to do it for this episode of the WrestleTalk News. Thank you so much for watching. Really do appreciate it. We'll be back with more next week. I've been Chubba Pete Cornell. This has been Randy Andy Nats. And like and subscribe. Jam that jam. Bye.